Hey, and hello everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford. I'm the creator of ComicBase. I also, dip my hands into various other, things from time to time. But anyway, welcome everyone. For next, well, this one's gonna be, I should warn everyone up front, is going to be kind of a short show because I got to get out of here and do other things. But we'll try to make it a very small, intense, but very good show if we can. Anyway, so let's get to it. We'll be talking a little bit about some minor comic-based news. Let me turn down the monitor here just a little bit. I'm getting little bit, a little bit of bleed back. Okay, hopefully that's a little bit better on the sound. Anyway, we'll be talking about very minor comic-based news in terms of what we're doing at the very moment. I want to talk about a few little mobile issues, a little bit of industry news, and also talk a little bit about pricing. But also, very importantly, I want to hit as many questions as I can from you folks. So if you have a question, please post it in the chat and preface it with @ComicBaseTV, and that'll help it stand out. And hopefully, I'll be able to hit a couple before we gotta head out of here. All right, so echo. All right, excellent. So we got that. All right, good to go. Let's get on with things. Hey everyone, Fred, first here. Well, welcome. I think I saw there was somebody here well ahead of time, but he scrolled off somehow. But Fred, you get pride of place, at least as far as the list I can see right now. Oro, greetings from Minneapolis. I hope you guys see spring at some point this year. That would be good. Mike, Zadu, a lot of representation from the Pacific Northwest I've noticed. So I hope you guys are hanging in there good. Greg, our mod is here, so watch out anyone who has any malefactors or auto spam you want to post, and we'll take it from there. Oh, and for low 90s in Phoenix, man, I wish I was there right now. It is a rainy, bleak day out here in Franklin. It was gorgeous earlier in the week, but this week has kind of been, kind of a waste. But the plants love it, so I'll be mowing the lawn a lot this week, this weekend. And Andre, nice to join us. Thomas B, Agent de Camp, a lot of folks in the house. All right, good to go. All right, so minor comic-based news. There's the current build right now. If you follow these things, 21.0.1 build 1631. This one is just a modest refresh from last week. Main thing we did is we just did another push to the servers to make sure that apparently there for about a week the distro servers hadn't updated with the current full build. There was some testing code still left in on the build that people were able to download at some, for a couple days at least of last week. That if you tried to do a quick report, it would give an error. But if that's was a problem for you, hopefully this build should take care of it for you. 1631. If you didn't have that problem, don't worry about it. You're probably good. No other real features to speak of on that one. We are tracking an issue right now with the iOS version of the ComicBase mobile app. What that one is, 22. I apologize about that. 22.0.1.1631. I had a typo in my notes here. Apologize. But anyway, we are tracking an issue with the ComicBase mobile app on iOS. It doesn't affect Android, but the iOS build is even though they're generated off the same code base, the Apple operating systems do some very strange things with lists in terms of when they appear to be there in memory and when they don't. I'm sure there's some fascinating and very involved explanation as to why Apple does things this way, but what's happening is if we load up a list with say 100 items and we ask it, hey, how many items are in the list right now? Sometimes it will say 50, sometimes it'll say 100, sometimes we don't know. Anyway, it was working before the auto-scrolling of long lists in the program. The auto-scrolling is when you open up the app and you go to a very long title, like say Action Comics, and you scroll the first 50, and as it gets toward the bottom, it kind of silently loads the next 50 and adds them to the list, and so on and so forth. But anyway, there was we'd actually gotten it working very smoothly previously, and then Apple apparently changed something in their operating system of late. It just got noticed earlier this week. We looked into it. We were able to verify that, yep, it's an issue. We got to look into it, which means we got to crack open the iOS code base again, see what the heck they're doing now and how we can work around it this time. So I'm really looking forward to that one. We spent about 2 hours just updating our development environments for the latest versions of the Apple development tools and builds and software updates and things like that. So it's just a joyous time our part. I will let folks know as soon as we've got a fix for that. Right now, the net effect of it is if you're scrolling down these long titles on your iPhone or something like that, you might see doubled up entries. So you might see, issues 1 through 50, then 51 through 60, through 100, and then 51 through 100 again, and then 150 through whatever. It's messy, it's ugly. We're trying to get it fixed, but it'll be a little while, and then as these things do, you then have to go through the Apple approval process. With Android, we can just post it to the app to the store, and it's usually live within a couple hours. Apple, sometimes, depending on their staffing levels, it takes a week. So we're on it, so we'll let you know as soon as we can. If you guys want to finesse the whole thing, and get folks to convince your wife that you need to buy a new iPhone, I guess one way you could do it is point out this egregious problem and say, well, I hear it's fixed in the next iPhone. Wait till we posted the new fix and then show off it working properly on your new iPhone. The iPhone will be between us. It will be secondary to the situation, but at least you'll have a shiny new iPhone. So there's that. All right. All right. So let's see here. All right. So some things have been flying by in the chat here. What is something about 200 characters? I don't know. This is so weird. Oh, he's talking about the comments. Okay. All right. So let's see if I can parse out the sense of things. I think he's talking about Crystal Reports to work. So Xanadu Comics. So what's the method to get Crystal Reports to work again? So if Crystal Reports is throwing fits for you right now, it's basically it's a pretty simple thing. What you want to do is quit your antivirus software. Oftentimes that's the thing that kind of got you in the fix to start with, because if your security software, your antivirus software is gotten a little nuts, it could be blocking the installation of software, of system files that are needed to do the install. If you uninstall ComicBase resources, that's under add and remove programs, and also make sure you uninstall SAP Crystal Reports. SAP is the German company that owns Crystal Reports. Crystal Reports is a large reporting package that's used by ComicBase as well as about everyone else under the sun. Anyway, if you then download the very latest version of ComicBase, so go down to my account and then registrations at comicbase.com, hit the download button, get the very latest build of ComicBase, download that, it'll install everything else that it needs to, and you should be good to go. If you're not good to go, let us know, but if you've done all the previous steps, everything should work just fine for you. We've literally had one person that didn't fix things for, and then there were clearly things going on with their machine that was just like, I don't know. I mean, we're seeing stuff in their event viewer where there was just like, I've never seen anything like this before, you need to take this machine to Best Buy. But everything else, it should set you up if that's been a problem for you. So anyway, give that a shot. It seems like it's been working pretty well for folks. All right, so let me see what we got going on here. Oh, hey, Brian and Ron Lashley. A lot of folks coming this late, but anyway, great to see everyone. I'm glad you could make it. All right. So yes, some industry news. Warner Media Warner, the parent company of DC, has been merging with Discovery. I think they're going to call it something really stupid, like either Discovery Warner or Warner Discovery or something like that. It's like, it is now the least official, least imaginative name in all of corporate merger history. But what they're doing right now is they're laying off a lot of Warner executive vice presidents. Apparently, the merger, which is due to go final as early as this Friday. Apparently, they're not afraid to clean house on that. So downstream of that, don't be surprised to see a lot of shaking up over in the ranks of DC. It feels like the people behind the merger are definitely want to set up the new company with a new staff and fresh focus. So we will report on that as we get details, but I'm just looking into my crystal ball for the future, and I'm not seeing the rosters of the senior execs staying exactly the same as they are now. Beyond that, I have nothing special. More interestingly, in terms of corporate maneuvers of the week, Elon Musk has just bought a 9.2% stake in Twitter, which, is kind of interesting. Twitter is not something I use a lot. It was something that was kind of vaguely interesting way back in the day, and my impression of it these days is it's not a place you go to if you want to feel better about life. It's if you're in the content creation business, like if you're a blogger or a newspaper article, I think those folks get a lot of use out of it and drive it all, because everything on Twitter is potentially a headline. Now, to civilians, we look at it and everything about it is a poorly considered, hot take on some controversial subject, giving the worst, most demeaning possible take to the thing with no subtlety or nuance whatsoever. So it's great if you want to get really hot and bothered about something, or if you want to get just get that adrenaline rush, which comes from just really hating another human being. If that's not what you go to Twitter for, or then honestly, I think you're in the wrong place. But if you like your news with any more level of nuance than that, it's probably not for you. More concerningly, though, of note of last several years is both Facebook and Twitter once upon a time being something like 3-4 years ago, used to say, hey, we want to be a bastion of free speech. We want to let just everyone have their say, whether we like it or not. You can argue back and forth. That's how we get stronger, better formed out ideas in America. And once upon a time, even Mark Zuckerberg over at Facebook was really, really, going out there saying, look, we're not going to censor people. What are you, crazy? No, that's not what we're here for. We're here to connect old, friends from high school and let everyone have their say. Of late, the tech execs, I think, have decided, both through a combination of sort of internal takeover by their more woke employees, and frankly a not too subtle threatening by the legislative powers that be, that if you don't do the things we want, we're going to start regulating in a way that you will not enjoy. And I think they've clearly taken the message that what they really need to do is act as kind of like the privately held censoring arm of the left. And so Twitter famously, shortly before the election, Hunter Biden, apparently left a laptop full of pictures of him smoking crack and, cavorting with hookers, and with tons of emails and documents talking about how he was going to, basically peddle his dad's influence all over Europe, acting as bagman for several ventures, in Russia and China, and they were going to hold 10% for the big guy, and everything about this, was basically the business partner. Even one of them came out and gave it, and said, yeah, that was a thing. The person referred to here in the message is Hunter. The person right there is the other partners that you refer to. Basically authenticated in real time in the real news. But on Twitter and Facebook, Twitter banned mention of the laptop altogether. If you tried to even privately message it before the election, they would shut down the tweet. So you couldn't even send a DM talking about it. Facebook, in the meantime, would just, took the more subtle approach of they would merely throttle down the content. So basically, you could share it, and it would get out there. It's just, it wouldn't actually appear in anyone's feed. It wouldn't get, done there. So now, I don't know, will be 14, 15 months later, after the New York Post broke the story on this one, with their preferred candidate safely in the White House, the powers that be have apparently decided that it's now okay for the Washington Post and the New York Times to say, oh yeah, that laptop which we swore was Russian information, which we insisted that all these companies ban, because it would be influencing an election unfairly. It'd be like the Russians were controlling the election with this unfair, prejudicial, completely made up information. Yeah, it was all true. So this, guys, just, I don't care if which party you voted for in the last election. If you're an American, this ought to make you just crazy. Because what you've done here is you've essentially co-opted one of the few places that we're supposed to be able to talk freely about whatever the heck we want, as long as we are not defaming people, we're not, we're not lying, we're not saying, evil, hateful, spiteful, harassing things about things. We're supposed to be able to say what is actually happening in the world, especially when it's true. And more and more in the last couple of years, there's a growing list. It seems like you have to add something every day to the list of things you're not allowed to say on YouTube, you're not allowed to say on Facebook, you're not allowed to say, especially on Twitter. Twitter, under Jack Dorsey, real character of a guy. I mean, he, I think, started out as one of your tech nerd, weird ass, Silicon Valley type characters. He looks like a homeless bum these days, but I mean, he's rich beyond, crisis. But he, once upon a time really threw and said, look, Twitter is for free speech, and eventually became the guy who's like, well, no, it's way more important to protect people from misinformation. It's just amazing that misinformation correlates so very highly with what people on the left don't want to hear said about anything of theirs, or it has nothing to do with unsubstantiated claims that they're making about people that they view as their political enemies. So anyway, this is the backdrop we've had in the last couple 3 years. It's been an increasing realm of being amazed at what you're no longer allowed to say in a public forum. And so in this, Elon Musk, who is basically has FU money. He is the richest man on planet Earth this week. He kind of does battle between him and Jeff Bezos over at Amazon, depending on whose stock is up, any particular day. But his stock is up very much at the moment, and he decided that, all the things that kind of bug me on the planet, it kind of bugs me we're not on Mars, kind of bugs me we haven't drilled a subway under LA. So he's been throwing his money where his concerns are, and he's decided that, not being able to say things in public forums bugs me. And so he said, well, the solution to it clearly is I need to buy a big hunk of Twitter. So now there are reasons to be hopeful on this one, and there are reasons to think this could be an absolute nothing burger, a year down the line. The reason to be hopeful is that, yeah, he does have FU money, and he does tend to get involved with things that concern him. He wanted to see space flights happen, and he's made that go off in a way that is putting NASA to absolute shame. NASA, who has a budget, we looked at the real dollar budget of NASA in the last 40 years, me and my daughter, and they're, back when they were still putting people, putting shuttle flights up and trying to launch, things into orbit, they have, a higher budget than they did then. The only difference is NASA isn't launching rockets anymore. It's taking them freaking forever to get anything done, and all those bureaucratic dollars are getting just sidelined into a number of other weird things that have nothing to do with what, I don't know what you guys all thought, but I thought it had to do with that giant rocket behind me. So in the meantime, Jeff Bezos, with Blue Origin, got involved in the effort, but honestly, you can tell his heart's not in it so much. I think he, thinks rockets are cool, but not in the way that Musk seems to think that rockets are cool, because, while Blue Origin's managed to get 1 or 2 launches out there and is still working essentially suborbital, SpaceX, it seems like every other week they're dumping another 60, satellites into orbit with one of their Starlink satellite launches. I mean, this stuff is getting so mundane about how frequently it's going up there, it's actually getting a little dull, which is the way that you want a burgeoning space enterprise to go. So anyway, these are the if the guy who's doing this, who says, hey, if it weren't, right now we'd be launching, was it the Starcraft? I'm blanking. It was Star something. It was the giant spaceship that's meant to eventually, transport people to Mars. That one from Musk's company, SpaceX. That one is currently being held up by, I believe, FAA regulations, but that's being slow walked, currently. But in the meantime, his competitors are doing all. So this guy seems to have some mojo behind things, and if he's going to take on the cause of free speech, well, to that extent, I really applaud it. Look, this isn't a political channel. I'm an American. I like being able to think that we all live under an umbrella where all of our rights are protected and we're allowed to have our say. I think that's whether I agree with you politically or not, I would wish you that I would wish you enjoy that freedom the way I do. I was just watching Fridays. If you guys remember that show from late 1980, it was a competitor to Saturday Night Live back at the time, and I was just curious about it because I happened to go across an old episode of Seinfeld, and I thought Michael Richardson. I was talking to my wife, and it's like, yeah, I used to be on that show Fridays. I'm like, Fridays. I kind of vaguely remember that, and I thought, we live in a world where everything is streamable. I wonder if there's a place I could stream it. It turns out there's an app called Tubi, Tubi, you can get on pretty much any of your smart TVs, and you can look up Fridays, and you can look back in time to 1980 and see a young comic called Michael Richardson, a very weird guy. He almost gave off kind of a crazed Robin Williams kind of vibe at the time. He later became Kramer on Seinfeld and so forth. One thing I had no idea about is Larry David was who was the writer of Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm. You know him as this old bald curmudgeon guy. Was one of the comics at the time. But I'm watching the show from 1980 a couple nights ago, and I remember thinking, yeah, it was great in the 1980s. More and more, I remember being a kid back then thinking, yeah, our parents never could have enjoyed this kind of crazy, off the wall, kind of risque, humor at the time. I mean, you remember all the grief that, you remember the state of television and censorship, and you heard stories about, Lenny Bruce and being arrested for telling jokes and things like that. And I remember at the time, just thinking, what a great age we live into, that, from Monty Python to this kind of stuff, we can enjoy all this freedom and have fun with it and really, have a great time. And honestly, for the last 5-6 years, it feels like the wall's just been closing in, and I'm thinking about, yeah, there's another movie that could never be made today. And it's not good. We don't have the technical ability to make it today. It's just that it reflects attitudes that are out of sync with the appropriate woke corporationness that's behind everything. Oh, it doesn't feature that this or that person in a positive manner. Oh, it makes fun of this this kind of person or that kind of person. It does not show this class as a paragon of every possible virtue, or it showed them as a villain. We always feel like everything, we must retroactively make all stories, make all history right, and as a result, we tell crappy stories. Anyway, I'm off on a bit of a rant on this one. I apologize for that one. But what I want to say is Elon Musk may turn some of this around a little bit with Twitter. Or, alternately, it could be something like a pump and dump. We don't know. We'll know later on. I kind of doubt it's a pure pump and dump. It looks like he's managed to maneuver his way onto space on the board in return for a promise not to grab more than 15% of the company's stock. In other words, not to launch a full-on hostile takeover, so they get to say what he has to say. And to the extent that they listen to him, and that to the extent that he fights for free speech, well, then that actually could be a really good thing for the world. Already the number one thing that we're hearing about is he promises an edit button might appear on Twitter. So when you say that really stupid hot take of yours, you might have a chance to take it back later. It'll be interesting about that, because apparently if you're into current Twitter, that's half the charm, is saying stuff that you will later regret and which will make you want to delete your account and get canceled for life. But that's why I'm not on Twitter, because I don't enjoy the blood sport. Anyway, guys, I love freedom. I think we all should enjoy it. If this is a move towards freedom, it's a good thing. If it's nothing, it's just a rich guy getting richer, well, then it's just another day. But, let's hope. That's my take on that one. All right, so let's see here. Going back to other things, and I'm going to just take a quick scan of the chats here. Thank you, Greg, for reposting the information about the crystal reports here. Okay. Oh, Ross says, thanks for remoting and fixing my system. The experience made me go out and buy a new desktop. Yeah, and unfortunately, I feel like over the years of running ComicBase, I feel like we sold a lot of computer hardware. I'm really sad that we don't have our own branded line of laptops or something like that, which are performance rated for ComicBase. I do a lot of work with music, and it used to be you could actually buy like Pro Tools systems, which back when even the effort of doing audio was enough to stress a Mac of the day. It was important to buy a Pro Tools, a certified system that was guaranteed to actually process those 8 channels of audio and with enough fluidity so you wouldn't drop any samples. But yeah. Yeah, anyway, I'm glad you got things worked out. We actually had to abort staff, I think, yesterday because someone got a call and they had just such an incredibly slow system that the tech support on it took forever. And it's like, yeah, well, we'll take up staff another day. So anyway, that's a thing. Age of the Camp asks, are scanners in stock yet? Oh God, the question kills me. I wish I could say yes. I really do. The answer, unfortunately, is no. We heard, last I heard, well, no, okay. First I heard they'd been shipped. They were coming out of Hong Kong. Everything was good. There was going to be somehow held up in customs for a while they checked over the lithium batteries. Why am I looking at eggs, bacon, what else? Sorry, spam. I've never heard of a country checking their exports that way, but hey, who am I to say what communist dictatorships do with, their exports? But anyway, that was apparently a thing. And then next thing I knew is Shenzhen and then later on half of China, and then it seems like all of China locked down with COVID again. And so then the things went into hiatus. They weren't moving along. I got advised that DHL had assigned us a second set of tracking numbers for our shipment. Unfortunately, I still don't see that they've moved. So we're waiting. And there's no one we can call for status, and I don't love this. So I'll let you know when there is something. All right. All right. Hey Ed, you can join us. All right. So checking else what's going on here. Saved on the internet. We'll have to post on for Tubi right now. Oh man, I do not know. Okay, so let's see. And there was somebody had something about Blue Origin. Oh, Blue Origin. Oh yeah, around it says Blue Origin is about a mile or two from me, and a lot of people there don't care about the culture and going over to Boeing. That's a bummer. I mean, it's one thing. It's watching like the SpaceX guys do a launch. You can't help but be impressed with this. I mean, like. It's a bunch of just geeks in their t-shirts who are just getting absolutely psyched about the idea that they're putting stuff up, they're putting stuff up in orbit. I mean, who else would think, to put, I think they threw a Tesla. They need to have a load to check one of the, as to whether one of their spacecraft was going to work and, park properly. And so in order to load the thing down, they said, well, we could load it up with lead. We could put whatever ballast in there we want. I said, stick a Tesla in there. Put a spaceman in there. Put an iPod in there with them. Reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and play Starman. I mean, you gotta love a company that has that kind of style and is really into their mission that way. Blue Origin, I don't know. They just don't seem to have the same mojo going right now. I mean, I hope they turn it around, but because I don't like it when one company runs all of anything. And I don't want when one company runs the tables, then that tends to be the best you can get. When there's 2 or 3 active companies, they're all competing in the same space, then you get stuff you never dreamed of. So that's what I'd like to see for space exploration. So we'll see. All right, moving on. Do a lot of spam. Tim mentions, you got me to buy a new SSD for my desktop. I also need a better one, so it all works out okay. Now I have to take time to install it. Yeah, no, good luck on that. I hope you enjoy them. SSDs are not a problem at all to install. Oh, here, I think, yes. So, visual example. So an SSD looks like this. I always tell people imagine a pack of cards, it's about the same dimensions, about half the thickness. And all you gotta do is, take, the one SATA power cable, put it in the wide area, put it, the SATA, thin cable in the other one, plug it onto your motherboard, restart your machine, initialize the drive, you're done. The whole thing takes 3-4 minutes. But anyway, we'll give it a go. And Fred asks, so ComicBase TV, what is your closest competition? It's funny. I would say what the real answer to that is the Void. Because in terms of the real competition in an area, it's nothing. Everyone who's in the ComicBase space is getting their ass kicked by nothing, which is to say, I really mean to, track my comics someday. I really mean to do something about all this stuff that's piling up, but it's too much work. I can't take it on, and so forth. And so, for everyone who wants to enter this space of doing what we do, the competitor that we're all chasing after is blow it off and forget about it. As far as people who do what we do a little bit, realistically, there's nobody who does it on the serious end at all. There's a number of companies that are in, I'd say, more of the hobbyist space. I've never seen very large collections done with them. But it's a pretty obvious thing to try to do as far as, hey, it's a book database, right? So, load in a book database pricing source, and I can get them from, I don't know, somewhere, and load the stuff in there, give people some edit keys, maybe throw a pretty, interface over the front of it, and, yeah, you're off to the races, right? And then if you want, lather, rinse, and repeat with anything else that has simple series and collectibles. So, you could do it for, in theory, stamps or action figures or rare coins or whatever else. I mean, if that's as deeply as you're thinking about the topic area, everyone's in it. Everyone does it. They give them away for free. There are various competitors who, sell their versions for $39-$49, and it'll run for a while. And and again, if you've got a small collection, hey, at least you're not doing nothing. That's good, right? But yeah, as far as comic books, I mean, I wouldn't tell a friend that he should get into this field, because the only reason that ComicBase exists is because we profoundly misunderestimated the difficulty and frankly the scope of what we were taking on. I mean, ComicBase 1.0, I always say, is I had, there were 297 titles in ComicBase 1.0 with, about 20,000 issues. And I thought I was almost done. I thought, well, there's some girl comics, and there's a couple of old comics like that aren't action or Batman that, I guess we don't have in there yet. But I have spent 20-30 years thinking that we were practically done. And honestly, it wasn't until about 15 years in that we started really realizing that no one has been close to handling this problem. And that's when we were getting to like the 350,000 comic list. By then, we'd had far more listings in ComicBase than, say, the Overstreet Price Guide or some of these really massive efforts that have been taken on to try to index comics. So yeah, we're taking that on while we're taking everything else on, and it's just nuts. And that now we're doing magazines and books, and and we will never be done with that effort. I mean, at least even I can tell. There's been so much published literature over the scope of time that no human will ever finish that job. But no, I mean, if you want to, I wouldn't tell. I always come back to, it's like, when you say, well, what would you do? It's like, well, what would I tell a friend, right? So if I like this person, would I tell them to get into this field? And the answer is no. What we clearly should have spent our time doing is writing medical billing software, in which case I would be working a quarter of the hours and I would be driving a Ferrari, because there's real money in that and the effort is nothing like. So I mean, the people who kind of come in it from the hobbyist end, where they just load up somebody else's database and they throw an edit thing on there, honestly, I'm not super concerned with those guys. And if you've got a small collection, it's like, well, knock yourself out and use whatever works for you. But as far as the people who are dumb enough to take the whole thing on as real comic collectors and really worry about the things that comic collectors worry about, everything from labeling their stuff to pricing trends and all the other stuff, as far as I can tell, everyone except us has been smart enough not to go there. But we'll see. Every once in a while I see someone enter the field, and you kind of keep a little bit of a tab on it and say, I wonder I wonder how long it'll take them to figure out what they've stepped into, and usually after 3-4 years most of them figured out that, yeah, this isn't for us. But yeah, we'll see. All right, so let's see. Yeah, for instance, when CV starts indexing lost works and attempts to recreate the card catalog for the Library of Alexandria, then we should start worrying. Yeah, I feel like we're halfway there. Let's use that as an excuse to move on to the other topic I really wanted to get to today, which is I'm noting this one as lesson number 913 of why I shouldn't be a corporate spokesman. if you guys haven't figured that out yet, you know, the reason you guys get me for the live stream every week is because there aren't any more smooth, talented, you know, well-spoken folks around to take your questions. If we had those, I'd put them in front of the camera and I would just get back to programming. But you got me, and one of the reasons it's terrible that someone like me will come out there is because I will actually tell you when our product isn't working right. I'll actually announce, oh yeah, iOS broke something and now our mobile app is doing weird scrolly stuff this week, and so yeah, it'll be better in a week or so. I mean, nobody who works for a self-respecting company would come out here and make that announcement on the corporate live stream. I'd fire that guy in a second. But that's what you got. You got us. But lesson number 913 of whatever you shouldn't do it is because I want to say, look, I'm getting increasingly worried that in terms of like pricing, that it's going to be one of those problems that we're probably doing the best that can be done, but it'll never be a result that meets everyone's expectations, and I don't know what to do about it. Let me be a bit more specific about that. So I got some email this last week. It's I get this every once in a while. It basically says, hey, look, I'm selling some comic books and I'm pricing them out, and I see you have it at this much and somebody else has it at a different amount, and how do I know you're doing the right thing versus the other guy? And the standard spiel, you guys have probably heard it before, is that, all right, the way we do pricing is we look at about 2.1, it's actually closer to 2.2 million prices every week from Atomic Avenue and Heritage Auctions. We just run a rolling average of what prices people have got things for sale at, and more importantly, what things have recently sold for. And if you want to see the longer version of that one, I believe like the first 3 or 4 podcasts go into this one for about an hour. But that's basically what we're doing, is we're running a rolling average. Now there's some exception cases if something just algorithmically just gets strange, or like we've had enough people post a wrong price all at once where it overcomes the noise filter. You could temporarily have the prices be the wrong price for a while until someone discovers it, in which case we have these correction mechanisms like request price check. If you highlight a line, a issue in the database that you think is, well, I don't see it this way, you can highlight that, right click, say request price check, send it to our editors and tell them why it feels wrong to you and what you think the right area is. And then we go and investigate even more sources and we try to correct whatever is seeming amiss. And that helps. I'm glad we did that one. I got very nervous when we added that feature a while back, but I think it's worked out for the best. But anyway, but this guy had a bunch of comics that are all the things that we do a terrible job with. And the recipe for having a comic that we are not going to price particularly well is have it be as unique as possible. So, if the closer it is to be one of a kind, the closer nobody can price it. That's just the way it is. We work by aggregating data and running averages. If there's only one data point or if there's no data points, then everyone's guessing, and our guess will be maybe no better or worse than anyone else's. And then if you can combine it's a fairly unique item with, and it's in a grade that gives it a very high multiple off of norm, then you're really going to magnify any aberration we've got in the database. So for instance, this guy had a 9.8 issue of some Transformers variant. So you've got something that maybe there are only 50 or 100 of these things ever printed. The typical pattern for something like that is they go into the hands of private collectors. They trade very, very infrequently. They might show up on eBay once or twice, but in all of history, you might find 5 sales records for these anywhere, and that includes the initial sale to the collector. And they had it in 9.8, which, let me go over to the other screen here and let me talk about what I'm talking about here. If we go up here under setup and we go to grading, pull this onto the proper screen so everyone can see it, you'll see that we carry everything as a percentage of near mint. So near mint, obviously, being near mint, is 100% of the near mint grade. And then we get to various other things. So this breakdown when you get to the CGC grade. CGC is a relatively recent innovation to the comic market, but when it came out, and let me go ahead and put myself on screen here just out of pure vanity. When CGC came along, it was spectacular it was speculatorific. They would actually run ads all through Comics Buyer's Guide talking about like, well, here's one that's in very fine condition, but here's one that's in very fine condition, but it's got a CGC seal on it, and look, it sold for 8 times as much. They would run that kind of ad all day long, and so people quickly internalized the idea that CGC is worth more than the same book not in a CGC sealer, and it's definitely been something that we've seen in the market. So a while back, the folks at Comics Buyer's Guide did breakdowns of how CGC grades would play out according to books that they could establish were in the same condition but weren't in a CGC sealer, and they came up with the set of breakdowns that we use right here. And when you look at 9.8, you'll see that that one runs 1,200% of 1,200% of the near mint price. So in other words, 9.8 is a little bit better than your average newsstand copy. Yeah, it's a pretty nice copy. It's like an especially nice new copy as opposed to your run-of-the-mill nice new unblemished copy. That's good for 12 times the near mint price on average when we did the search. Worse yet, if you have this jackpot grade of CGC 10.0, it came up that those were selling on average for almost 30 times what a regular near mint copy of the same issue would go for, just in terms of the speculating market. So when you take those two factors and put them together, you've got a comic book that's already, in theory, a premium limited edition item, so it comes in at a high price. It has very little sales activity, so there's nothing to ameliorate and help you guide what to expect of it in terms of the price. Certainly nothing that happened recently on that one. And then you're going to multiply whatever price you come up with by 12 to get the near mint equivalent. Or, if you had something even like a 10.0, you'd multiply by 28. Your confidence that we nailed that price to the 4th decimal place should be incredibly low. It's not, I hate to say it, but we'll never be able to solve that problem. There will never be enough data on the sales of 9.8 copies of Transformers, whatever the subsidiary series was, Variation F. There's never going to be something that will give you more than an approximate feel for that one. We'll give you an approximate feel for it, but the further away you are from that kind of near mint mean on a regular comic book, the worse anybody's pricing is going to be, and the more you really got to use your own judgment on that. Our goal mostly when the algorithm works is our goal is to start the discussion and let the market tell us when we're wrong. And if somehow we get really wrong, is to let you guys clue us into, hey, we need more data and bump us back on course. But that's rare. The vast majority of the over 1 million comics that are in ComicBase right now, we start the discussion and then we let the market tell us the rest. So, but I do want to go and say, keep your the ultimate decision on the price of anything is always between the two, the person selling it and the person buying it. That when that thing actually changes hands, that's when that thing found its market price. And typically when you sell it, you're typically both people, at least in that moment, thought that they got an okay deal. The person buying it thinks they got a little better deal than they would have for holding on to the money, and the person selling it thinks they'd rather have the money than the comic. And that's what makes the world beautiful. It makes the world go around. It guides the sale of everything. Every once in a while, someone gets a really unusually good or a really unusually bad deal. But my experience of doing this stuff for 30 years is that usually when somebody manages to actually move the thing, it's pretty close to where the price of the thing to move it is, because almost nothing is sold with no competition, and if it wasn't you, it would have been one of the other guys selling it for another price. So that said, do keep in mind that there are limits to what any guide can give you, and the further away you get from what the guides are good at, which is to say, hey, a regular comic that was printed and there's a whole bunch of copies of it and a lot of people bought and sold it at grades there's something like the norm. The further away you get from that, the worse the guides are going to be, and we have more data than most. Actually, I think we have more data than everyone. But nobody's going to nail that one to the end, and that actually makes me a little bit sad. Two other things I want to bring up just as examples on that one, not just to beat up the poor Transformer guy. And if he's listening, I hope you take this in the spirit it's meant to be. I'm not picking on or anything like that. Honestly, if I'm picking on anything, I'm picking on my own product. And like I say, it makes me sad to think that this might be a problem that nobody short of God, can ever really nail. But because I mean, you'd need that kind of omniscient knowledge to know what's in the heart of the person buying it. What is the last dollar you could get out of them before they walked away. And when there's no data to help guide it, it gets, the situation is just too murky. But other ones that give me real pause on this one. You guys might remember this one from the previous week. This is the pay copy of Marvel Comics #1. It just came up for auction again. It had been up for auction a couple of years ago, and I think it sold for like 5 times what it sold for, a couple of years ago. If you guys stare at it, and look at the writing all over the cover, and frankly some of the obvious chipping defects, it's also, just to make things really fun, clearly misgraded even by CGC standards. I mean, you could say, and again, we talked about this at the time, but there isn't a grading standard that I know of that makes this a 9.2, but whoever handled it at CGC apparently thought differently. So I think this thing sold for like $3 million the other day. But this thing is so unique. It's the pay copy of Marvel Comics #1. So it's a comic book that almost never exists. It almost never exists in any kind of good shape. But this particular one was used to write down which artists got paid what. And had we and noting out their contributions throughout the book, and the initial off when they'd actually paid them. So this thing is just they've decided this is not just a rare comic. It's not just a rare comic in rare grade. It's a unique artifact. So in ComicBase, it actually has its own variation. It's the 1A copy of Marvel Comics, because it's been a little bit storied as an auction item. So this one really is some. I mean, at this point, I almost wonder if we shouldn't just score the near mint one for this particular issue, which there is exactly one of, at 9.2, and simply make it be the near mint equivalent or equivalented price of of those CGC default breakdowns. Or alternately, we could just say it's in CGC 9.2 for $3.2 million, and that is just report the latest auction price on this one issue. I think you could make a solid argument for that. There are, by the way, different variants that are sold. I want to say Zenoscope does these, where they will sell you a guaranteed 9.8, I think. It might be a 9.6, but a 9.8 copy of one of their books, and I think they sell it to you. I mean, because it's going straight from their printer over to their partners over at CGC, straight over to get graded, slammed in the whole thing, labeled with a 9.8, and then they sell it back to you for, I want to say they go for like $50 each, default. But I mean, I think there's, because that you're always going to get a 9.8, I think there is an argument to be made for making the grade on that one issue in ComicBase be CGC 9.8 as opposed to whatever the near mint equivalent extrapolated edition would be. It would complicate up a lot of things on our point, but if you were to push that argument with me, I would certainly hear you out on it, and we could argue which one leads to less bad outcomes back and forth. And then finally, in terms of things that drive you nuts, or at least that drive me nuts, we just had submitted to us this last week. I want to see something like 4,000 issues of an old newspaper called The Sun. I want to see this thing got going in like 1830. I want to say the range that was submitted was between 1833 and 1913. And forgive me if I'm wrong, I'd have to look it up, but it's not yet in my personal copy of ComicBase. I was just looking at it as the traffic came in. So, in situations like this, I have to put myself in the position of, okay, I'm an antiquarian book dealer. And I actually walked into a place like this in Scotland once. A little a guy named Arthur was running a thing over in Decoles Y'Alcaid. Actually, I'm sorry, he just gave him a British accent. He had a Scottish accent, which was way more awesome. But I've gotten out of practice with. I just remember I was asking him for directions for something else. So I was like, you go to Argyll Street. It's like Argyll, which to us Americans would be Argyle. But anyway, but he had in his shop the most fantastic collection of weird antiquarian comics I'd ever seen. And I only had X amount of British money on me at the time. I wish I'd gone and somehow gotten much more before I walked in there, because there wasn't time before I had to be out on the train to go back the next day. But I mean, I bought from him like these, everything from a Scottish comic called The Brains, which again, if you're American, would be the Browns, but it's actually on the cover, it's the Bruins, Broons, which was, I guess that's their version of, I don't know, Dennis the Menace, maybe? You know, what would you make the equivalent of that one? That'd be like from the 1950s. I got a lot of awesome English Treasury, you know, editions from them. But I also got this ephemera from like 1890 and 1913 and these like I forget the name of the particular things, but they were actual strip comic publications that went well before Famous Funnies #1 in America. I mean, they went 50 years earlier for when these things got going, and it added a whole new collection in ComicBase of like boys paper. I guess I'd call them like boys magazines. Lads, well, they were not lads magazine. It's a different deal, but like boys adventure comics. Which if you go, and that's really, you know, when you look at what became comic books, that's where it started. These halfpenny, you know, broadsheet type things, which would have adventure stories, and there was a serial, I believe it was the Magnet, or it might have been the 5-cent Wide Awake Library, but it had serializations in, I want to say it's second or third issue of Treasure Island by that brand new author Daniel Defoe. But it would have things like that, and they'd be, you know, sometimes fully illustrated, sometimes partially illustrated. I remember there was one from 1917 or so. It was a comic on the front of it that was making fun of, oh yes, well the Hun will really send them packing when that, you know, something or other comes along. You know, it was just making, you know, it was a German, you know, World War I comic, you know, reference. But anyway, amazing stuff. And he had all this stuff in Mylar, you know, of form factors I'd never seen before. They were like these huge, I don't know what they'd be, A1, A2, A4, I don't know British paper size off the top of my head, but they were these insane things that were impossible to pack, you know, to get home. And if you're Arthur and someone walked in with a shed load full of Sun newspapers that had miraculously been preserved from 1833, I had to ask myself, how would Arthur post, you know, how would he price these? And we have to have these impossible discussions because there has never been one that, to our knowledge, there's never been some of these issues for sale in any publicly viewable venue, ever. You know, not that you could say this is issue number 173 of The Sun from 1851 and it's in, you know, very fine condition. As far as I know, that's never happened. It's not the sort of thing that auction houses take a lot of interest in. It's not. You really just have to put yourself in the position of Arthur the antiquarian book dealer who wants this stuff out of his shop someday, as opposed to the really sexy, you know, first edition copy of Alice in Wonderland, which if you're an antiquarian book dealer, you don't mind if that thing sits in your front, you know, under the glass in your front counter for, you know, several years, because it makes you look cool to have it there. But for someone like Arthur, who is in the business of getting rid of this stuff, you know, how much could he get the punter from America who seemed interested all of a sudden to actually pony up for it? And that's a lot of what informs our thinking of how to start the discussion on these things. And from that, we again hope that if somebody goes to their attic, finds a ton of old 1800s issues of The Sun, and starts putting them up for sale, then whatever happens to those will then later inform what the real price is. But it really is one of these things where it may be that nobody ever can give you a right price on them. It's the sort of thing where if you went to an auction house and said, hey, I've got a copy of, you know, The Sun, from second issue from 1833, it's in such and such condition, what do you think we could get for it at auction? Or like Antiques Roadshow, and, you know, they'd look at it like this for a while and say, well, yes, it's very significant. You know, they'd give you a little bit of a rundown, the history of The Sun and how important the paper was. And this particular specimen is very interesting because you see on page 3, it's got the advert for a company that later became Gillette. You know, yeah, you could make it interesting. You could try to drum up public interest in it, but until you went to that effort, I don't think you'd ever really know whether it would sell. So, yeah, we're in the unenviable position with some of this stuff to just kind of say, well, things that we've seen that are a bit like it in the past, we put them about here, so this is about where we'd be thinking for these, but could we be wrong by, you know, if by 100%? Absolutely. Or, could we be, you know, off, You know, could the true price be either half or twice as much? Absolutely. I'm just hoping it's not a factor of 10 on some of this stuff. And if it is, I hope we adjust quickly. But yeah, this is one of those things where I gotta confess, I don't think anyone's ever going to get it entirely right. I think we'll do our best to make sure we get it more right than anyone else. But, you know, the data geek in me does despair a bit. So yeah, this again, reason number 913 why I should not be allowed to have a podcast. All right, guys. Let's see here. There were some other things that came by. I just want to address those, and then I do got to get out of here. Let's see here. I think I hit that one. Ronald says, if anything, Bezos want to buy ComicBase and stick it in the back end of our Comixology, so I might be driving that Porsche. Yeah, if I'll there's a story I'll tell you a different day. There have been some weird corporate takeover-y things that have gone on over the years. At some point, I don't know, we'll have a 30th anniversary, episode or something, which by the way is coming up right around Christmas time. Will be our 30th anniversary for doing ComicBase. But and I'll have to say, these strangest people we've tried to do deals with, which came off, didn't come off, or tried to buy us, or vice versa, and yeah, we'll dish some dirt at some point. All right, let's see here. 12 binders. I think I'm looking for ComicBase TVs. Agent Camp says, are you ever going to have a custom ComicBase variant from the big two? We very nearly did it once. We were looking into it with Batman the Dark Knight 3 was going to come out. And obviously Batman the Dark Knight, legendary, but it was one that they were putting open to have your own, you could commission your own your covers from, and if you bought X numbers of them, then you could have your own thing. And we thought, every year when we do Comic-Con especially, we're always thinking, hey, it's always nice if we can give people something really cool and unique if they buy a ComicBase at the show. And we thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was a custom copy of Batman the Dark Knight 3 #1 with a special ComicBase done or Atomic Avenue done logo on, or not logo, but variant cover on it, and we could, you buy the archive edition, we give you a copy or something. But then we reached out to DC, and I don't know if this is always the case, but it was the answer we got back from the time is, yeah, you gotta buy however many copies, and that wasn't a problem. It's like 1,000 or 2,000 copies, so it's like it was a big amount of money up front. But I thought, well, we'll sell them eventually. We'll get our money back. But the real, or if we don't sell them on Atomic Avenue, we'll give away enough that we'll amortize it as a marketing expense. The problem came is that we couldn't do the cover we wanted. You had to, basically, you couldn't tell the cover artist what to do. You just gotta say, well, you can pick from amongst our 5 approved artists and they'll do you a cover. And so we just fork over all the money. We don't get to say what the cover is, and you'll just do us a cover, and we'll could say that that's the ComicBase cover. Yeah, that's basically the deal. And we're like, not as interesting. Whereas if we'd been able to, I don't know, hire Glenn Orbick or something like that and do like a painted pulp version of the Batman or something like that, I mean, that would have been really cool. It would have cost us a freaking fortune, but it would have been really cool. But just, hiring, rando, official DC artist #6 to do the cover, I don't know. It's for something else, but it wasn't for us. So that's as close as we've come to date. There might be something in the future. Don't know. But we always, when we did, especially Comic-Con, we always used to try to have there be something cool. All right, let's see here. About show, false, fake currency express the cost of those issues. Oh yeah, if you guys get a chance, just check down the slot for Fred. He's running his own show and simultaneously with this one. It's pretty good. All right, I think that's about it. All right, guys, I'm going to pack it in for the day. You guys have a good one. I am off to grab myself a beer, and have a good one. We'll have a more directed show next time out, I promise. But in the meantime, stay safe, and, wish you all well. All right, I'm going to see if I can get this to switch over properly without having to dim down everything on the screen eventually. Let's see, and take it away. Take care.